My white CEO wife threw me out of our luxury building like I was nothing, had security escort me past 30 witnesses while her new lover watched and smirked. She called me unstable in front of everyone, using that word like a weapon, making sure I looked like the dangerous black man who couldn't handle being dumped. What she didn't know was that my family built half this city, and while she was celebrating her victory, I was making one phone call that would change everything. You see, some people use their money to hurt others, but I learned to use mine to build something they could never tear down. By the time Claire realized what I'd done, it was too late, and the woman who'd made me homeless was about to learn what it felt like when the ground shifts beneath your feet. But this story isn't just about revenge. It's about what happens when someone tries to erase you and you refuse to disappear. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're from because this is a story about finding home in the most unexpected places. The AC unit wheezed like an old man climbing stairs. I wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my work glove and checked my watch. 4:30. The emergency call had taken 3 hours longer than expected, but Mrs. Chen's apartment was finally cool again. She'd pressed a 20 into my palm despite my protests, her wrinkled hands shaking with gratitude. "You're a good man, Marcus," she'd said in broken English. "Your wife is lucky." Lucky. I rolled that word around in my head as I loaded my tools back into the van. Claire used to say she felt lucky back when she'd trace the muscles in my arms after I'd spent all day fixing someone's heating system. Back when she'd brag to her friends about having a man who could actually build something with his hands. That felt like a long time ago. I grabbed the bag of Thai food from the passenger seat, Claire's favorite pad Thai from the place on 5th Street. A peace offering. We'd been walking on eggshells around each other for weeks. Every conversation felt like stepping on broken glass. She'd been working late more often, coming home with that distant look in her eyes, like she was solving problems I couldn't understand. Maybe tonight we could talk. Really talk. The drive to our building took 20 minutes through downtown traffic. Our building. I still thought of it that way, even though Claire's name was the only one on the lease. The Meridian Towers rose 30 stories into the gray sky, all glass and steel and money. I'd never lived anywhere so fancy before Claire. Sometimes, I still felt like I was visiting someone else's life. I pulled into the parking garage and grabbed my keys. The security guard at the front desk, Tyler, a young guy fresh out of college, usually gave me a nod and a smile. Today, he looked uncomfortable. "Hey, Tyler," I said, walking toward the elevators. Mr. Hill?" His voice cracked a little. "I need to check something real quick." He tapped his tablet screen, frowned, then tapped it again. The frown deepened. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "Your access was removed this morning." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, sir." The words hit me like cold water. "What do you mean, removed?" "I don't know the details. I just see that your keycard and elevator access were deactivated at 9:47 a.m. I pulled out my phone and called Claire. Straight to voicemail. Her professional voice. "You've reached Claire Whitmore Hale, CEO of Whitmore Enterprises. Please leave a message." "It must be a mistake," I told Tyler, but my voice sounded strange to my own ears. I tried texting Claire. "Hey, having trouble getting into the building. Call me." No response. Tyler shifted from foot to foot. "Maybe you should call your wife?" I did. I tried the elevator anyway, pressing my keycard against the reader. Nothing. The little light stayed red. Other residents walked past us. Mrs. Rodriguez, from the 12th floor, gave me a questioning look as her keycard worked perfectly. Mr. Kim hurried past without making eye contact, like whatever was happening to me might be contagious. I felt heat creeping up my neck. Not the good heat from working hard, but the burning kind that came with shame. "Let me try calling building management," Tyler offered, but his tone had changed. Helpful was turning into careful, like I might be a problem. That's when I saw Delia Rojas, the building manager, walking through the lobby. She glanced in my direction, and for a second our eyes met, but instead of coming over to help, she turned and walked quickly toward the management office. Something cold settled in my stomach. Don't worry about it, I told Tyler. I'll figure it out. I stepped outside into the autumn air. The sun was setting, painting the building's windows orange and gold. People moved past me on the sidewalk, heading home to their families, their dinners, their normal lives. I stared up at our apartment on the 22nd floor. The lights were on. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Don't come up tonight. We need space. Space. Like I was taking up too much room in her life. I called her again. Voicemail. I texted back. What's going on? Can we talk? The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. 20 minutes passed. I leaned against my van, watching people come and go through the building's golden lobby like actors in a play I wasn't part of anymore. Finally, headlights swept across the parking lot. Claire's BMW pulled up to the front entrance. She stepped out wearing her power suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored, the suit she wore to important meetings, the suit that meant business. But she wasn't alone. Ethan Vale unfolded himself from the passenger seat, tall, blonde, wearing the kind of casual clothes that cost more than I made in a week. He'd been to our apartment before, always with some excuse about work projects or client meetings. Claire said he was just a colleague, said I was being paranoid when I mentioned how he looked at her. Looking at them now, I realized I hadn't been paranoid enough. Claire saw me and stopped walking. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, she straightened her shoulders and approached me like I was a business problem that needed handling. Marcus? Her voice was controlled, professional, the voice she used with difficult clients. You can't be here. I live here. The words came out rougher than I intended. No, she said quietly. You don't. Not anymore. Ethan stood behind her, close enough to touch. He wasn't smirking exactly, but there was something satisfied in his expression, like he was watching his favorite team win. Claire, what are you talking about? My voice cracked. We're married. We need to discuss boundaries, she said, not answering my question. And security. Security. The word hit me like a slap. I'm your husband, I said. You're being unstable, she replied, and there it was. The word that meant something different when applied to a black man standing outside a fancy building. The word that made Tyler's hand drift toward the security button behind his desk. The word that made other residents cross the street. Unstable, dangerous, aggressive. I felt my hands clench and forced them to relax. I wouldn't give her that weapon. I just want to talk, I said. We are talking. Claire's mother, Vivian Whitmore, emerged from somewhere behind them, perfectly styled silver hair, diamond earrings catching the lobby light. She looked at me like I was a stain on her daughter's expensive clothes. And now we're done? You can go upstairs, Claire said, her tone careful and measured. To get your things. Security will escort you. Escort me. In my own home. Tyler appeared beside us, looking miserable. Sir? Ma'am? I wanted to argue, wanted to demand explanations, wanted to ask Claire when she'd stopped being the woman who used to curl up against my chest and tell me about her dreams. But 30 people were watching from the lobby windows. 2 more residents had stopped on the sidewalk, pretending to check their phones while they listened. 5 minutes, Claire said. Take what you need. The elevator ride up felt like drowning. Tyler stood behind me, hand resting on his radio, like I was a threat, like I might suddenly become the kind of man who broke things. Our apartment, Claire's apartment, smelled different. Cologne that wasn't mine. A leather jacket I'd never seen hanging on the chair where I usually put my work shirts. little changes that added up to one big truth. I'd already been erased. I grabbed clothes from the dresser, trying not to look at the bed we'd shared for 3 years, trying not to see the second toothbrush in the bathroom, trying not to notice that my favorite coffee mug, the one Claire bought me for my birthday, was missing from the kitchen. Time's up, Tyler said softly. I stuffed everything into a duffel bag and 2 trash bags. 3 years of marriage, reduced to what I could carry. Claire waited by the elevator, arms crossed. She didn't look at me as I passed. Don't embarrass yourself, she said quietly. Just for me. Don't make this harder than it has to be. The elevator doors closed between us like a curtain falling. In the lobby, residents scattered like birds. Nobody wanted to watch, but nobody could look away. Delia Rojas stood by her office door, face carefully neutral. I caught her eye and saw something there. Not pity, exactly. Something else. Something that looked almost like an apology. I walked out into the night carrying my life in garbage bags. My van felt smaller than usual. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, hands shaking around my phone. Claire had sent me another text. Do not come back. Don't embarrass yourself. Then another message appeared. Not from Claire's number, but recognized the voice immediately. Ethan's laugh echoed from my phone speaker. Charity husband's finally gone. Now we can get back to real life. He must have grabbed Claire's phone, or maybe they were sharing it now. The message cut off abruptly, but the damage was done. Charity husband. I drove to a parking spot 3 blocks away and tried to figure out what came next. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed, lost. This morning, I'd been Marcus Hill, HVAC contractor, married man, tenant in a fancy building. Tonight, I was homeless, carrying my life in trash bags. My phone rang. Jamal. Where you at, brother? You sound weird in your text. I'd forgotten I'd messaged him. I need you, was all I'd managed to type. Marcus, talk to me. Claire threw me out. The words tasted bitter. For another man. Silence on the other end. Then, what? When? Tonight. Right now. I'm sitting in my van. Come to my place. Right now. No. Pride was a stupid thing, but it was all I had left. I'm fine. You're not fine. Nobody's fine when their wife. He caught himself. Look, just come over. We'll figure this out. I said no. Another long pause. All right. But Marcus, don't do anything stupid. Whatever you're thinking, don't do it. I wasn't thinking anything. That was the problem. My mind felt empty, scraped clean. After I hung up, I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's satisfied face, heard Claire calling me unstable, felt 30 people's eyes watching me get escorted from my own home like a criminal. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A voice message from Ethan's number. Tell your boy he can pick up his tools tomorrow. Security will be watching. My boy. Like I was property that belonged to someone else. The sky started turning gray around 5. I sat up, wiped my face, and looked at myself in the mirror again. Different this time. Still hurt, still angry, but something else too. I'm not going to beg, I whispered to my reflection. I started the van and drove to work. The HVAC shop yard looked the same as always. Gray concrete, rows of white vans, the smell of coffee and motor oil. My coworkers were just arriving, lunchboxes in hand, talking about weekend plans and football games. You look like death, said Rico, our lead tech. Rough night? I nodded and grabbed my work orders for the day. Keep moving, stay busy, don't think about it. But Jamal wasn't letting it go. He cornered me by the tool crib, coffee in hand, eyes serious. You slept in your van. It wasn't a question. I'm fine. No, you're not. And that's okay, but we need to talk, really talk. So I told him everything. Claire's cold efficiency, Ethan's smugness, the security escort, the charity husband comment. Jamal's face got darker with every word. That's evil, he said when I finished. Not just the cheating, the way she did it, making you look like a threat. She knew exactly what she was doing, I said. She knew how it would look. What are you gonna do? I shrugged. Find an apartment, move on. Bullshit. You're planning something. I'm not planning anything. Good. Because whatever you do, they'll paint you as the angry black man who couldn't handle being dumped. Don't give them that story. He was right. I knew he was right. But the anger sat in my chest like a burning coal, getting hotter every time I breathed. My phone buzzed. Claire had posted something on social media, a photo of her coffee cup on what looked like a restaurant table. Nothing special, except for the hand reaching across the table. Expensive watch, pale skin, silver ring. Ethan's hand. She was already showing him off, already rewriting our story like I'd never existed. The burning coal in my chest flared hotter. Don't look at her social media, Jamal said, reading my expression. It'll just make you crazy. I need to get my tools, I said. They're in the building. Storage? Want me to come with you? No, I can handle it. But when I got to the Meridian Towers that afternoon, Tyler wouldn't let me pass the lobby. I'm sorry, Mr. Hill. I have orders. My tools are my livelihood, I said. I need them to work. I understand, sir, but I can't. What's the problem here? Delia Rojas appeared beside us. She looked tired, older than her 58 years, but her voice was steady. Mr. Hill needs to retrieve his work equipment from storage, she told Tyler. That's personal property. Tyler looked confused, but Mrs. Whitmore Hale said, I'll handle it, Delia said firmly. She looked at me. Can you wait outside for a few minutes? I need to make some calls. I went back to my van, but instead of leaving, I watched the building, watched people come and go, watched the life I used to be part of continue without me. 20 minutes later, Delia emerged from the lobby. She looked around carefully, then walked to my van. Get in, I said. She slid into the passenger seat and pulled an envelope from her purse. I'm sorry about yesterday, she said. I was told to revoke your access. I didn't have a choice. I understand. No, you don't. She handed me the envelope. The building's being sold. The owner, Mr. Petrov, he's sick. Cancer. He needs to liquidate assets quickly. I opened the envelope. Real estate flyers, financial documents, timeline sheets. Why are you showing me this? Because I've watched you for 3 years, she said. I've seen you fix Mrs. Peterson's heater when she couldn't afford a service call. I've seen you help tenants carry groceries, shovel the front walk, change light bulbs that weren't your responsibility. I know who you are. I stared at the papers, sale price, closing dates, contact information. And I know who she is too, Delia continued quietly. Your wife. She treated you like hired help yesterday, like you were nothing. My grandfather's voice echoed in my memory. Never let someone else hold your roof over you, boy. The ground can always shift. This is a lot of money, I said, looking at the sale price. Not for your family. I looked up sharply. Hill Construction, she said. I looked you up after yesterday. Your family built half the commercial district downtown. Your grandfather started with nothing and ended up owning city blocks. I'd walked away from that world when I was 18, wanted to build something myself instead of inheriting it. But the family trust was still there, still had my name on it. Think about it, Delia said. That's all I'm asking. She got out of the van and walked back to the building without looking back. I drove to a diner on the other side of town and spread the papers across a booth. The numbers were real. The timeline was tight. The building could change hands in 2 weeks if someone moved fast. My phone sat on the table beside the documents. One call would start a process that couldn't be undone. One call would shift the ground underneath Claire's feet, the same way she'd shifted it under mine. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. Hill Family Trust, a familiar voice answered. This is Margaret. Margaret, It's Marcus. I need to talk to you about making an acquisition. Margaret's voice was exactly the same, warm but professional, like honey over steel. She'd been managing the Hill Family Trust since before I was born, watching over the empire my grandfather built from dirt and determination. Marcus Hill, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. It's been too long. Your grandfather would be proud to hear from you. I need to move quickly on something, I said, spreading the building documents across the diner table. Real estate acquisition, full cash offer. How quickly? Days, not weeks. The line went quiet for a moment. Then, send me everything. I'll have our lawyers review it tonight. After I hung up, I sat in that vinyl booth until the waitress started giving me looks. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I kept staring at those papers like they might change into something else. By the time I met Jamal for dinner, the wheels were already turning. You're different, he said, cutting into his chicken. Calmer. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in days. About what? I told him about Delia's envelope, about the phone call to Margaret, about the possibility that was taking shape in my mind. Jamal set down his fork. You want to buy the building where your ex-wife lives? She's not my ex-wife yet. Marcus. His voice got serious. This sounds like revenge. It's not revenge. It's business. Don't lie to me. And don't lie to yourself. I looked out the restaurant window at the evening traffic. Normal people driving home to normal lives where their wives didn't throw them out like yesterday's garbage. Maybe it's both, I admitted. Brother, I get it. I really do. But this is a dangerous game. You start playing with that kind of money, that kind of power, and you might become someone you don't recognize. She already made me into someone I don't recognize. The words came out harder than I intended. She made me into a threat, a problem, someone who needed to be managed. Jamal leaned back in his chair. So, you're gonna manage her back? I'm gonna make sure I never have to sleep in my van again. 3 days later, Margaret called with news. The seller accepted, she said. Mr. Petrov was impressed by the speed and the full cash offer. Closing is set for next Friday. That fast? When you're dying and need liquidity, bureaucracy becomes very flexible. The building will officially belong to Hill Holdings LLC by the end of next week. Hill Holdings. Not my name directly, but close enough. What about the current management? We can keep the existing staff if they're competent. Makes the transition smoother. They are, especially Delia Rojas. Consider it done. Any other special instructions? I thought about Mrs. Peterson's shaky hands, about the way she'd smiled when I fixed her heater, about all the other tenants who just wanted a safe, decent place to live. Protect the good tenants, I said. Long-term residents, seniors, families, make sure they're taken care of. And the others? We follow the lease terms exactly, no favoritism, no breaks for people who don't deserve them. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not in my van this time, but in a decent motel room paid for by the family trust. Tomorrow I'd start looking for an apartment, but not too far from the Meridian Towers. I wanted to be close enough to watch. The closing happened on a gray Friday morning in a law office downtown. Mr. Petrov looked frail but grateful, shaking my hand with fingers that felt like bird bones. You will take good care of the building? He asked in heavily accented English. Yes, sir, I will. Good. Some of these tenants, they are like family to me. 20 years, 30 years they live there. They'll be protected. He smiled and signed the papers that transferred 30 stories of glass and steel from his name to mine. Well, to Hill Holdings LLC, but close enough. Delia was waiting for me when I arrived at the building that afternoon. She stood in the lobby like she belonged there, which she did, more than Claire ever had. So, she said quietly. How does it feel to own the place? Weird, I admitted. Good weird, though. What happens now? Now we run it right. Take care of the tenants who deserve it. Hold others accountable for their lease violations. She nodded slowly. Some leases come up for renewal soon. Which ones? 22nd floor, Unit 2247. Claire's apartment. Our old apartment. When? End of next month. 6 weeks. 6 weeks to decide what kind of landlord I wanted to be. Let's walk the building, I said. I want to see everything through fresh eyes. We started in the basement and worked our way up. Delia showed me systems I'd helped maintain, introduced me to staff I'd known for years but who were now, technically, my employees. On the 15th floor, we knocked on Mrs. Peterson's door. Marcus, she said, opening it wide, I heard about your troubles. Are you doing okay? I looked at this 72-year-old woman who'd lived in the same apartment for 25 years, who baked cookies for the security guards and left get well cards for sick neighbors. I'm doing better, Mrs. Peterson. How's your heating system? Perfect since you fixed it. You're such a good boy. A good boy. Coming from her, it didn't sting. It felt like a blessing. Mrs. Peterson, I said carefully, if anything ever changes in the building, new management, new policies, don't worry, your home is secure. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Your home too, honey. Don't let anyone tell you. Different. After we left her apartment, Delia and I rode the elevator in silence until she said, You're not going to tell her who owns the building now? Not yet. When the time's right. And Claire? When are you going to tell her? I thought about that. About the moment when Claire would realize the ground had shifted underneath her feet, the same way it had shifted under mine. When she figures it out herself, I said. It didn't take long. The first sign was subtle, a new policy about noise complaints. Ethan had a habit of playing music late, loud enough that neighbors started leaving notes with Delia. Under the old management, those complaints might have been ignored. Claire's money and status bought a lot of tolerance. Under new management, 3 documented noise violations meant a formal warning letter. Claire showed up in Delia's office the next morning, holding the letter like it was contaminated. This is harassment, she said, her professional voice cracking around the edges. It's policy, Delia replied calmly. Noise ordinances are clearly outlined in your lease. I want to speak to the owner. The owner doesn't handle day-to-day tenant issues. That's what property management is for. Claire's face flushed. She wasn't used to being told no by people she considered beneath her. Do you know who I am? You're a tenant, Delia said. Same as everyone else. I watched this exchange from the security office monitors where Tyler and I were reviewing new safety protocols. Tyler had warmed up to me again once he realized I wasn't going anywhere. She's not handling this well, Tyler observed. Would you? Probably not, but I wouldn't have treated you the way she did either. Fair point. The second sign was the violation notice about unauthorized modifications. Ethan had installed some expensive sound system without permission, drilling into walls that belonged to the building. Another clear lease violation that previous management had overlooked. Claire tried calling the building owner directly. The number went to a legal firm that politely told her all tenant issues should be directed through property management. She tried bribing Tyler for information about the ownership change. Tyler, who remembered being told to escort me from my own home, politely refused. She tried pressuring Delia with threats about connections and lawsuits. Delia documented everything and continued following policy. By the third week, Claire was pacing the lobby like a caged animal. I could see her through the security monitors, phone pressed to her ear, voice getting sharper with each conversation. She's figuring it out, Delia said, joining me in the security office. How can you tell? She's stopped trying to charm people. Now she's just angry and scared. Good. Delia looked at me carefully. Is it good or is it enough? I thought about that question while I worked. During the day, I still took HVAC calls around the city, still fixed broken heating systems and temperamental air conditioners, still got thanked by grateful customers who treated me like a professional instead of a problem. But in the evenings, I came back to the Meridian Towers, my building now. I walked the halls, checking on systems, talking to tenants, making sure everything ran smoothly. Mrs. Peterson always invited me in for tea. We'd sit in her small kitchen while she told stories about her late husband, about the building's history, about the community that had grown up around these 30 floors. Change isn't always bad, she said one evening, pouring Earl Grey into delicate china cups. Sometimes old things need to be shaken up. What if the shaking hurts people? Depends on what they've done to deserve the shaking. I thought about Claire, 3 floors above us, probably pacing her expensive apartment and trying to figure out how her world had shifted without warning. What if they hurt you first? Mrs. Peterson's eyes got sharp. Then, you make sure they understand actions have consequences. But you don't become cruel, Marcus. Cruelty makes you smaller, not bigger. That night, I made a decision. The next morning, I had Delia schedule a building wide meeting. Time to address the recent management changes directly. Time to be clear about what kind of building this was going to be. 23 tenants showed up in the community room. Claire sat in the back, arms crossed, Ethan beside her looking bored and slightly drunk. Mrs. Peterson sat in the front row, hands folded neatly in her lap. Thank you all for coming, I said, standing at the front of the room. I know there have been questions about recent policy changes and new management. I wanted to address those directly. Claire's face went pale. She was starting to understand. The Meridian Towers has been sold to new ownership, Hill Holdings LLC. I let that sink in for a moment. Some of you might recognize that name. Mrs. Peterson smiled. A few other long-term tenants nodded with recognition. My family built this neighborhood, I continued. My grandfather believed that where you live should be a source of pride, not stress, that good tenants deserve respect and protection, that communities are built on mutual consideration. Claire stood up abruptly. This is, ma'am, I said politely. Please hold questions until the end. She sat back down, but her hands were shaking. Going forward, we'll be enforcing all lease terms fairly and consistently. Good tenants, people who respect their neighbors, take care of their homes, and contribute to this community, will find this a very pleasant place to live. Those who don't, I shrugged, will find it less pleasant. After the meeting, Claire cornered me in the hallway. What did you do? Her voice shook between rage and fear. I didn't do anything to you, I said calmly. I did something for myself. You bought the building? My family bought the building. I just make recommendations about how it's managed. This is. She struggled for words. This is insane. This is obsessive. This is business. You're trying to control my life. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd loved for 3 years. The woman who'd thrown me out like garbage while her mother watched for entertainment. Claire, I said quietly, you controlled my life for 3 years. You decided where we lived, how we spent money, who we socialized with. You made me feel grateful just to exist in your space, and then you threw me out like I was nothing. That's different, is it? You used your money and status to make me homeless. I used mine to make sure I'll never be homeless again. Her face crumpled for a moment before pride pulled it back together. I could fight this. I could make this very expensive for you. You could try. I kept my voice gentle, reasonable. But you should know, I'm not going anywhere. This time. This is my building, my community, my home. Claire stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. That evening, I sat in Mrs. Peterson's kitchen again, drinking tea and watching the sun set through her window. You told them, she said. I told them. How do you feel? I considered the question. Honest, I said finally. For the first time in weeks, I feel honest. Good, she said, patting my hand. Honesty is the foundation of everything else. Outside her window, the city lights began to twinkle. My city, my building, my life, rebuilt from the ground up. But I knew this was just the beginning. Claire wouldn't give up easily. And Ethan was the kind of man who didn't like losing face. The real test was still coming. Ethan's first move was predictable. 2 days after the building meeting, he cornered Tyler during the late shift, sliding a $100 bill across the security desk like he was buying information instead of asking for it. Just tell me who's really behind this Hill Holdings thing, he said, voice casual but eyes sharp. There's got to be paperwork, corporate filings. Tyler looked at the money like it was radioactive. I can't help you with that, sir. 200. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the desk. I watched this exchange from the monitor in Delia's office, where we were reviewing maintenance schedules. Tyler had grown a spine since the ownership change. Funny how respect worked both ways. Your boy's learning, Delia observed. He's not my boy. He's his own man. Unlike some people in this building, she was talking about Ethan, but I thought about myself 3 weeks ago. Sleeping in my van, begging for access to my own home, letting Claire define my worth based on how well I fit into her world. We were all someone's boy once, I said. And now? Now we choose who we work for. The next morning brought Claire's mother. Vivian Whitmore arrived in a black BMW like she was attending a funeral, which, in a way, she was. The funeral of her daughter's carefully constructed life. She swept through the lobby in designer clothes that cost more than most people's rent, making a beeline for Delia's office. But Delia was ready. Mrs. Whitmore, she said pleasantly, how can I help you? I want to speak to whoever owns this building. All ownership inquiries go through our legal department. I can give you their number. Vivian's mouth tightened. She wasn't used to being handled by people she considered staff. Do you know who my family is? I know you're Mrs. Whitmore. Is there a specific building issue I can help you with today? The issue is that someone is targeting my daughter and her partner. Someone with a grudge. Delia's expression didn't change. All tenants are treated equally according to their lease terms. If there are specific violations you'd like to dispute, this isn't about violations. Vivian's voice rose, drawing attention from other residents in the lobby. This is about harassment. Ma'am, I'll need you to lower your voice or I'll have to ask you to leave. I could see Vivian's shock through the security monitor. Probably the first time in 20 years someone had told her to control herself. You have no idea who you're dealing with, she said, but quieter now. I'm dealing with a guest in my building, Delia replied smoothly, and all guests are expected to follow common courtesy rules. After Vivian left, I found Delia in her office, hands shaking slightly as she poured coffee. That was impressive, I said. That was terrifying. Women like that can destroy careers. Not anymore. Not here. She looked at me carefully. You really think owning a building makes you immune to people like her? I think it makes me equal to people like her, and equal is all I need. But Vivian wasn't finished. That afternoon, she returned with reinforcements. The city building inspector showed up unannounced, clipboard in hand, ready to find violations that could shut us down or cost serious money. I watched him from across the street, making notes while he examined fire exits and electrical panels. Someone called in complaints, Tyler told me. Anonymous tip about safety violations. Find anything? Not much. Building's in good shape. You and the previous maintenance teams did solid work. The inspector looked frustrated as he filled out his report. Hard to manufacture problems when there weren't any real ones to find, but Vivian was just getting started. The next week brought a different kind of pressure. Ethan started hosting louder parties. Not quite loud enough to violate noise ordinances, but loud enough to make neighbors uncomfortable. And when neighbors complained, he'd apologize with expensive gifts, wine, flowers, restaurant gift cards. He's trying to buy goodwill, I told Jamal over lunch. Turn other tenants against the new management policies. Is it working? With some people. Mrs. Rodriguez likes the wine. Mr. Kim appreciated the sushi gift card. But, but Mrs. Peterson sees right through it, and she's got more influence in this building than people realize. Jamal shook his head. This is getting complicated, brother. You sure you want to keep playing this game? I thought about Claire's face when she'd called me unstable, about Ethan's laugh when he called me the charity husband, about sleeping in my van while they enjoyed the apartment I'd helped pay for. I'm not playing games, I said. I'm running a business. The real test came 2 weeks later. Ray Sutter showed up at my door on a Tuesday evening, hat in hand, looking nervous. Ray did renovation work around the building, kitchen updates, bathroom repairs, the kind of projects that required permits and inspections. Marcus, he said, I need to talk to you about something. We sat in my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom 3 blocks. From the Meridian, nothing fancy but clean and mine. Ethan Vale offered me cash to do some work without permits. Ray said, kitchen renovation, some electrical stuff, under the table, no paperwork. And I said no, but he's pressuring me. Says if I don't help him, he'll make sure I don't get any more work in buildings where his friends live. This was it. The line crossed from pressure to sabotage. What kind of electrical work? Rewiring for a home theater system, major stuff. The kind that needs proper permits and inspection. Electrical work without permits in a 30-story building. Fire hazard. Insurance nightmare. Legal liability. Ray, I said carefully, if you do unpermitted electrical work and something happens, a fire, someone gets hurt, you know who they'll blame, right? The contractor. Me? Right? And guess who won't be around to back up your story when the lawyers start asking questions? Ray's face went pale. I hadn't thought about that. Think about it now. Men like Ethan don't go down with the ship. They throw other people overboard and claim it was self-defense. The next morning, I called a meeting with Delia and Tyler. We need to tighten security, I said. All renovation work gets proper permits. All contractors get background checks. And I want cameras in the hallways. More cameras? Tyler asked. Better cameras. High definition. With audio if that's legal. Expecting trouble? Delia asked. Preparing for it. 2 days later, Ethan made his move. I was in the basement, checking the heating system when the lights went out. Not just dimmed, completely dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in red shadows. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Basement, now. I could have called security, could have waited for backup, but I was tired of being managed, tired of being careful, tired of letting other people set the terms. I found Ethan in the utility room, standing next to the main electrical panel. He'd somehow gotten a key, probably bribed someone or sweet-talked his way past security. You think you're clever, he said without turning around. I think I'm prepared. Prepared for what? You bought a building. Congratulations. You're a landlord now instead of a janitor. I was never a janitor. I was a professional contractor. He laughed. Same thing to people like me. People like you? He turned to face me then, and I could see he'd been drinking. Not drunk exactly, but loose around the edges. People who matter, he said. People who build things that last. People who don't have to work with their hands. You don't build anything, I said quietly. You just take credit for what other people build. I take what I deserve, like Claire, like this apartment, like the respect that should come with money and breeding. Breeding. There it was, the word underneath all the others. Here's what's going to happen, Ethan continued, moving closer. You're going to stop this petty revenge fantasy. You're going to back off from harassing Claire, and you're going to find someone else to be obsessed with. Or what? Or, I'll remind everyone what you really are, a bitter black man who can't handle being dumped, a stalker who bought a building to terrorize his ex wife, a dangerous person who shouldn't be around decent people. The room felt smaller suddenly, hotter. I could feel my hands clenching. You done? I asked. Are you listening? I heard you, now hear me. I kept my voice level, controlled. You don't live in my building anymore as of next month. Your lease isn't being renewed. You can't do that. I can do exactly that. Month to month lease, 30 days notice, no cause required. It's all in the paperwork your girlfriend signed. Ethan's face went red. Claire owns that apartment. Claire rents that apartment from me. I'll fight this. I have lawyers. Good luck with that. He took a step toward me, hands balled into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually swing. Part of me almost hoped he would, but he was smarter than that, or maybe just more cowardly. This isn't over, he said. No, I agreed. It's not. He left without turning the lights back on. I stood in the emergency lighting for a few minutes, letting my heart rate settle, then flipped the breakers he'd thrown. That night, I called Margaret. I need a security consultation, I told her. Professional grade. Someone who understands how to protect property and people without making it obvious. Expecting trouble? Trouble's already here. I just want to make sure I'm ready for it. I'll send someone tomorrow. The security consultant was a quiet woman named Sarah Chen, who'd spent 10 years in corporate risk management. She walked through the building like she was reading a book, noting sight lines and vulnerabilities, asking questions about staff procedures and emergency protocols. Your main problem, she told me afterward, isn't physical security, it's reputation management. Meaning? Meaning the people you're dealing with fight dirty. They'll try to make you look like the aggressor even when you're defending yourself. You need documentation of everything. Cameras, witnesses, paper trails. I've got cameras. You need more than cameras. You need allies. People who'll speak up when someone tries to paint you as the bad guy. That evening, I knocked on Mrs. Peterson's door. Marcus, she said, as always delighted to see me. Come in, come in. I was just making soup. Her apartment smelled like chicken and vegetables and home. We sat in her kitchen while she ladled soup into bowls that probably cost more than my first car. Mrs. Peterson, I said, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Do you trust me? She set down her spoon and looked at me seriously. Marcus Hill, I've watched you for 3 years. I've seen you fix things when you didn't have to. I've seen you help people who couldn't help themselves. I've seen you treated badly by people who should have known better. She reached across the table and patted my hand. I trust you more than I trust most people half my age. Why? Because things might get complicated in this building. People might try to make me look like someone I'm not. And I need to know that good people will remember who I really am. Mrs. Peterson's eyes got sharp again. What kind of people? I told her about the pressure, the threats, the escalating attempts to force me out or make me look unstable. That boy, Ethan, she said when I finished. I've seen him in the hallways, loud, rude, treats the staff like servants. And that woman, your wife, she's gotten mean since he moved in. She wasn't always like that. People show you who they really are when they think they have power over you, Mrs. Peterson said. Sounds like she showed you exactly who she was. Will you help me if I need it? If people start spreading stories about me being dangerous or unstable, honey, she said, squeezing my hand, I've been waiting 72 years to help a good man stand up to bullies. Try to stop me. That night, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger anymore, not hurt, something steadier and stronger. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was protecting something bigger than my wounded pride. I was protecting home. The breaking point came on a cold Thursday in November. I was replacing a water heater on the 8th floor when my phone exploded with notifications. Text after text, each one making my stomach drop further. Jamal. Brother, you need to see this. Check your social media. Tyler. Sir, there's something online you should know about. Even Mrs. Peterson, who barely knew how to send texts. Marcus, dear, that awful man is telling lies about you. I finished connecting the water lines before I looked. My hands were steady, but my heart was racing. Claire had posted a video on her company's social media page. Professional lighting, perfect makeup, sitting behind her CEO desk like she was delivering a quarterly report. I want to address some concerning behavior that's affecting our community, she began, her voice carrying that boardroom authority that used to intimidate me. As many of you know, I'm a resident of the Meridian Towers downtown. Recently, this building was purchased by someone with a personal vendetta against me and my partner. The camera stayed tight on her face, sincere and worried. Since the ownership change, we've experienced targeted harassment, unreasonable noise complaints, frivolous lease violations, threats disguised as building policies. Her voice cracked slightly, a masterful touch. I believe this stems from my decision to end an unhealthy relationship with someone who couldn't accept that decision. She never said my name, never mentioned race directly, but every word was carefully chosen to paint a picture: unstable ex boyfriend, abuse of power, woman in danger. I'm sharing this because domestic harassment doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like business decisions. Sometimes it wears a suit and speaks the language of policy and procedure. She leaned forward, eyes glistening. But it's still harassment, and it's still dangerous. The video had been shared 47 times in 2 hours. Comments poured in. So brave to speak out. This is terrifying. Can't she get a restraining order? Men like this are why women don't feel safe anywhere. I sat in that 8th floor hallway, water heater humming beside me, watching my reputation burn in real time. My phone rang. Margaret. Marquise, we have a problem. I saw. It's worse than just social media. She's filed complaints with the Housing Authority about discriminatory practices. She's contacted the Better Business Bureau, and she's hired Morrison, Vale, and Associates. I recognized the law firm name. White Shoe. Expensive. The kind that specialized in making problems disappear for people with money. What do they want? Settlement talks. They're alleging harassment, discrimination, and abuse of process. They want you to sell the building back to the previous owner and sign a non disclosure agreement. How much? They didn't name a figure. But Marcus, they're not really after money. They want you gone, silenced, made into a cautionary tale. I thought about Mrs. Peterson's soup growing cold in her kitchen, about Tyler finally learning to stand up for himself, about all the other tenants who'd started saying hello to me in the hallways, treating me like I belonged there. Set up the meeting, I said. Are you sure? Once we engage with them, this becomes a formal legal matter. It was always going to be formal, I said. At least now it's honest. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon at Morrison, Vale and Associates downtown offices. 42nd floor, views of the river, the kind of place designed to remind you how small you were. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for my wedding. Ironic, but it was the nicest thing I owned. Claire sat at the conference table like she was chairing a board meeting. Ethan beside her, Three lawyers arranged behind them like a wall of expensive education. Margaret sat next to me with our own lawyer, a sharp woman named Diana Ross who'd handled property law for the Hill family for 15 years. "Thank you all for coming," said the lead lawyer, a silver-haired man who probably charged more per hour than most people made in a month. "We're here to discuss a resolution to what's become an unfortunate situation." He slid a folder across the table. "Mr. Hill, we believe this offer is more than generous, considering the circumstances." I opened the folder. They wanted me to sell the building for exactly what I'd paid, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and relocate to another city. In exchange, Claire would withdraw all complaints and refrain from pursuing criminal charges. Criminal charges. For what? Running a building according to lease terms? "This is interesting," Diana said, reading over my shoulder. "What criminal activity are you alleging exactly?" The lawyers exchanged glances. "Stalking, harassment, abuse of process. Mr. Hill purchased that building specifically to intimidate Ms. Whitmore Hale." "He purchased it as a business investment," Diana replied smoothly. "Do you have evidence he's violated any housing laws?" "The pattern of behavior speaks for itself." "What pattern? Enforcing lease terms, requiring permits for renovations, following building codes?" I watched Claire during this exchange. She sat perfectly still, hands folded, but her knuckles were white. Ethan kept checking his phone, leg bouncing under the table. "Mr. Hill," the silver-haired lawyer addressed me directly, "you have an opportunity here to walk away with dignity, to put this behind you, and start fresh somewhere else." "Somewhere else," I repeated. "Yes, a clean break. No admission of wrongdoing, but a recognition that sometimes proximity makes situations difficult." There it was, the real offer. Disappear. Except that I didn't belong in Claire's world, in that building, in that neighborhood. Go back to being invisible. "Can I have a moment with my client?" Diana asked. We stepped into the hallway. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the city spreading out below us. My city, the one my grandfather had helped build. "They're scared," Diana said quietly. "Of what?" "Of losing control of the narrative. Your ex-wife's social media play was desperate, not strategic. If this goes to court, discovery will be very interesting. Text messages, financial records, witness statements. You think we can win?" "I think they have more to lose than you do. The question is, what do you want?" I thought about that. What did I want? I wanted to sleep in my own bed instead of my van. I wanted to fix Mrs. Peterson's heater without asking permission. I wanted to walk through that lobby like I belonged there. I wanted to stop being treated like I was temporary. "I want to go home," I said. We went back into the conference room. "Mr. Hill has reviewed your offer," Diana announced. "He declines." Claire's composure cracked for just a moment. "What?" "He's declining your settlement offer. He'll keep the building, continue operating it according to all applicable laws, and looks forward to defending himself against any frivolous claims you choose to pursue." Ethan leaned forward. "This is a mistake." "For who?" I asked. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he continued. "The connections we have, the influence. You think buying one building makes you untouchable?" "I think buying one building makes me a property owner," I said calmly. "Same as you've always been." The silver-haired lawyer tried to regain control. "Mr. Hill, please reconsider. Litigation is expensive, time-consuming, public. Are you sure you want your personal business dragged through the courts? Are you sure Ms. Whitmore Hale wants her personal business dragged through the courts?" Claire spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. "What's that supposed to mean?" Diana smiled. "Discovery works both directions, Ms. Whitmore Hale. If you're alleging a pattern of harassment, we'll need to establish the full timeline. When the relationship ended, how it ended, who was involved, financial arrangements during the marriage, social media activity, text messages. Claire's face went pale. All of it becomes public record, Diana continued, available to journalists, competitors, anyone curious about how Claire Whitmore Hale handles personal relationships. You're threatening me, Claire whispered. I'm explaining the legal process, Diana replied pleasantly. Discovery, cross examination, character witnesses. It can be quite thorough. The room went quiet except for the hum of expensive air conditioning. Finally, the silver haired lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we should adjourn and reconvene when everyone has had time to consider their positions. Good idea, Diana said, already packing her briefcase. We'll be in touch. In the elevator down, Margaret asked, How do you feel? Lighter, I said, like I can breathe again. That evening, I walked through the Meridian Towers lobby like I owned it, which I did. Tyler nodded respectfully. Delia smiled and handed me a cup of coffee. Mrs. Peterson waved from the mailboxes. But the best moment came as I was checking the security monitors in Delia's office. Claire appeared on camera, walking through the lobby with two suitcases. Ethan followed behind her, carrying boxes. Where are they going? I asked. Mrs. Whitmore Hale informed me this afternoon that they'll be staying at her mother's house while they assess their housing needs, Delia said. Apparently, the building has become too stressful. I watched them load their things into Claire's BMW. Just before they drove away, Claire looked up at the building one last time. Even through the security camera, I could see something in her posture. Not quite defeat, but recognition. What about their lease? I asked. Ends next week anyway. She's not renewing. And the apartment? Mrs. Peterson's granddaughter is looking for a place. Recent college graduate. Good job. Excellent references. I smiled. Mrs. Peterson's granddaughter sounds perfect. 2 weeks later, I was installing a new thermostat in Mrs. Peterson's apartment when she handed me an envelope. What's this? Wedding invitation. My granddaughter Sarah. Remember her? The one who's moving into 2247? I remember. Congratulations to her. She wants to have the reception in the building's community room, if that's okay with the landlord. The landlord. Me. I think the landlord would be honored. Mrs. Peterson squeezed my arm. You did good, Marcus. You stood up for yourself without becoming cruel. Your grandfather would be proud. That night, I stood on my new apartment's balcony looking down at the city. Lights twinkled in windows where people were living their lives, cooking dinner, watching television, arguing and laughing and dreaming. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Some mornings, I still drive past the building. I see your car parked outside. I know you're there, taking care of things like you always did. I know I threw away something real for something that looked better from the outside. I know it's too late to take any of it back, but I want you to know that I know. No signature, but I recognize the words, the rhythm, Claire's voice, even in text. I read it twice, then deleted it. Some things couldn't be taken back. Some ground, once shifted, didn't shift again. But that was okay. I'd found new ground, steadier ground. Ground. That belonged to me. 6 months later, I was walking through the lobby when Tyler stopped me. Mr. Hill, there's someone here to see you. Says she's a reporter. I found a young woman with a notebook sitting in the lobby lounge. Professional but friendly, the kind of journalist who probably specialized in human interest stories. Mr. Hill, I'm Jessica Chen from the City Paper. I'm working on a story about urban housing issues, particularly how building ownership affects community stability. How can I help you? I've been talking to tenants here, Mrs. Peterson, the Rodriguezes, Mr. Kim. They all mentioned you specifically, how the building has improved since you took over. Better maintenance, more responsive management, a stronger sense of community. I sat down across from her. It's not about me. It's about treating people with dignity. Mrs. Peterson called you a landlord who remembers what home means. Can you explain that? I thought about it. About sleeping in my van, about being locked out of my own life, about the choice between bitterness and building something better. Home isn't just shelter, I said finally. It's security, respect, belonging. Some people use housing as power over others. I try to use it as protection for others. Even when those others include people who've hurt you, she'd done her research, knew about Claire, about the social media campaign, about the legal threats that had quietly disappeared when Claire realized discovery worked both ways. Especially then, I said, revenge makes you smaller. Building something makes you bigger. The article ran 2 weeks later with the headline, From Eviction to Ownership, How One Man Rebuilt Home. It mentioned the Hill family's history in the neighborhood, Mrs. Peterson's upcoming granddaughter's wedding in the community room, and the building's 98% tenant satisfaction rating. It mentioned Claire only as a former tenant whose lease wasn't renewed. That seemed about right. These days, I still fix heating systems around the city, still get my hands dirty and solve problems other people can't. But now I come home to a building where people know my name, where Mrs. Peterson bakes me cookies, where Tyler asks about my day, where Delia brings me coffee without being asked, where I belong. Some mornings, when I'm checking the lobby security monitors, I see a familiar BMW slow down as it passes the building. Always with tinted windows now, never stopping. I used to wonder what Claire was thinking in those moments, whether she regretted her choices, whether she missed the man who used to fix her problems before she decided he was one. But I don't wonder anymore. The ground shifted under both our feet. The difference is, I learned how to build new ground. She's still looking for somewhere to land.